Okay, so the plan for this lecture is that it's going to go in Module 6. Uh, Module 6, Week 8 is coming up on us quick, which means finals in your 8-week courses and midterms in 16-week courses, so it seemed like a good time to go over study skills. And obviously, this is not one that you can just list out some definitions for, right? Every one of us is an individual. We all think differently. As a result of that, we all learn differently. So what the best study habits are going to be different for each one of us. So I'm just going to go over a few points, mention some things that work for me. Hopefully this will at least get the gears rolling in your mind, and you can help come up with a system that works really well for you. What works best for you. So all I can do is kind of give you some tips that worked really well for me, and maybe at least inspire some ideas that work well for you. So let's get started here. The plan is week 6, but it should be obvious why I wanted to make this video early and make it available, make sure it's available the whole semester, because of the content here, right? That's something that can be useful for day 1, not just come finals time. So I'm going to start here with my approach to learning, and you'll want to and kind of go over how I developed that approach. You'll want to look into something like this and figure out what works best for you. I probably already went over this, at least a brief version, in our Zoom sessions or something early in the semester. That's my plan. But plans change. And like in these videos, when I refer to scripts, what I'm actually talking about is a stack of Post-it notes that I might not even look at. That's how plans go. Plans tend to get messed up, so I usually just go with a rough idea, a stack of Post-it notes. And that way there's something, but it still flows freely. So I guess my approach to learning started the first time I went to school back in 2000. It was summer 2000. I just got fired from a job at an Arby's, and I was out looking for. It was near the beginning of the month, so I had a few days to find a job before the rent came due again. So I was out looking for a job and drove past IUS and thought, well, why don't I apply to school? I'm out turning in applications. Didn't really have any thoughts or plans at the time. Just, I'd heard repeatedly school is a good thing. So I'd been fired from my job. So it was like, okay, transitioning, I'll try this transition. And I kind of wasn't really sure what I was doing at the time. I majored in philosophy and minored in music. Looking back now, I have no idea what I planned to do with that. Write a meaningful song or something, but it was interesting. That's what it was. It kept my interest. But at that time, my approach to learning was I basically tried to create a file cabinet in my mind. Tried to organize my mind into like a file cabinet, and every new piece of knowledge, I would sit there and organize that someplace where it went. And it worked. I still remember a lot of that stuff, but the still remembering it 20 years later here is more because it was philosophy and music, so I found it really interesting, not necessarily this method. That didn't go too far. By autumn of the following year, it had kind of all fell apart. And then in my early 30s, I returned to school again. The story of that, I was between positions because for a while I had done audio engineering, and computers finally reached the point around 2010 that the things humans are most likely to mess up, the software automatically fixed. So obviously I still have lots of microphones and cables and all that stuff and record a band, but music's a lottery ticket. I mean, if used car guys aren't making commercials, paying somebody to make commercials, it's not a job. It's a lottery ticket. So sitting around one day trying to figure out what to do. I saw a commercial for a school that had robotics. I was like, oh, maybe I'll give that a try. So they had the website and the commercial, so went over, logged onto the website. I got as far as seeing what their tuition was and thought, oh, maybe I'll go give community college a try. So that's how when I came to IVYT myself. I jumped over to the IVYT website and it was 30 minutes before the deadline. I somehow got all the paperwork filled out in a couple of minutes and started a few days later. But I came with a different approach. It was in a rush, and I was like, okay, what I did last time, that file cabinet, I should have left that picture up there because I was done talking about it. But that nice organized file cabinet, I knew didn't really work for me. So I just wanted to find something different. So instead of a nice organized file cabinet, I might have seen the spider web is what inspired this thought. And so maybe I'll try it that way and see if it works. So instead of those nice organization of facts, I thought about a web that would catch the knowledge. And instead of organizing it nicely in a file cabinet and doing all that, just let it fall into place on its own was my idea. I'm still working on a picture here, but I haven't quite figured out the best way to represent this, but something like we have our random facts. In English class, the pathos appeal is a great way to reach people because even humans that don't show their emotions still have emotions. So the pathos appeal is a good way to reach your audience. Over in math class, addition and multiplication are commutative operations. The numbers commute back and forth. Random facts. What's another one? In physics class, gravity is 9.8 meters per second is a reasonable number to use all the time. If we need a more accurate number, we can just Google it and find it there. But a bunch of random facts that just on their own are kind of separate. And this is what I tried to do the first time: just memorize all those and organize them as their own individual things. This time, when I came back to school, and this worked a lot better for me, it's an individual thing. Instead of just finding the facts, I tried to form connections between the facts. So even across all the different subjects, form all these connections. And then when a new fact showed up, it just kind of gets caught in that web of understanding and falls right in place on its own. And it takes a little bit extra, but look for the connecting points between things. For example, a word that's going to show up in every one of your classes is analyze. It's going to show up everywhere. Analysis means break into pieces and build understanding from the pieces. Understanding. Probably should have another shorter word to use there. Build understanding from pieces. So, another way to refer to that analytical knowledge is the definition. The knowledge that's true by definition. But the pieces building up that particular knowledge. And that's going to show up in all your classes, this word. So instead of memorizing what analysis is in an English class, or analysis is in a math class, or analysis is in a software development course, or what analysis is in a chemistry course, the analysis itself is a connecting point between all those different courses. And it forms a web, which what's different about them is how we break it down, right? I can't remember which dot I pointed at, but the way we break it down in a chemistry class, break down our knowledge in chemistry class is different than the way we break down our knowledge in English class, and then put back together understanding by examining each little piece of it. But that process, break it down, examine each little piece, and put it back together. That would be common in our English class and our chemistry class, whichever ones I was pointing at, in the math class. And uh, that's a word that's going to show up in pretty much every class. So that's our two big ones, analysis and synthesis. Synthesis goes the other way. Synthesis starts with the pieces and builds up something new. Uh, Synthetic knowledge is referred to as by personal experience in philosophy classes. But that's our two main ones, analytical knowledge and synthetic knowledge. And through school, you're mostly studying analytical knowledge. So analyze is something that's going to show up in every one of your courses. So that can be a connecting point by which you can connect all your courses. And then when a new course shows up and you gain new knowledge and start to understand what analysis means there, that understanding of analysis kind of creates a better web. It just gets caught in that web of understanding. So that's the approach I took when I came back to school this time, because the whole organized file cabinet of the separate dots on their own didn't work out so well. So that was my approach to it. But again, an individual thing, you have to figure out what works best for you. That's something that worked really well for me, and that helped to lead into a study habit that worked really well based off that web. And kind of an example of analysis and synthesis itself, right? The first time I went to school, it didn't work out so well, so I analyzed what went wrong. And one way to think about it is I tried to treat it like a file cabinet, a big chunk of metal. But my brain is a organic, natural thing. A spider web's a natural thing, so maybe my natural brain will function better like a natural spider web than a big chunk of steel. And it worked for me. An example of analysis and synthesis right there. I analyzed what went wrong and synthesized a new solution, which is another important point. We don't learn anything from stuff we get right. So when we make the mistakes, that's when we learn from. That's where we're learning. And so don't let fear of making a mistake inhibit you, right? Don't make mistakes the goal, but don't be afraid of making the mistakes. Learn from the mistakes, because we don't learn anything from the stuff we get right. It's when we get stuff wrong that we really learn. And so this was something that I got wrong, and when I learned from that mistake, it worked really well for me. But everybody thinks a little bit different, so you're gonna have to figure out what works best for you. And this kind of led to a study habit that worked better for me than anything I had tried before. Going back to elementary school, to high school, colleges, and every learning experience before that, not even the formal school, just, interest in a subject and going to the library and learning about it. It was studying that subject. But when I was pointing at these dots, I mentioned a whole bunch of them, right? English and chemistry and physics and math and software development courses and networking courses, computer security courses, a whole bunch of them. And that's how I would study. I wouldn't sit down and study, do math homework for 20 minutes from 8 to 8:20, and then from 8:20 to 8:40, jump over and do the computer networking homework. I would sit down with all of my textbooks and all of my notes and everything open at once and jump back and forth between them. One way I often ended up phrasing that was work with the ADD instead of against it. I just made sure the distraction was as productive as what I was being distracted from. But it's really kind of like this spider web. Everything's there at once. So instead of trying to learn just some English stuff or just some cybersecurity stuff or just some math stuff, make the goal the deeper understanding of the universe. That's what worked better for me. That's what worked best for me, so I thought I'd share it. And that was the study pattern that really worked well for that. For me, is instead of separating it, I just tied it all together. I'd open all my textbooks, all my notes, everything else, everything at once, and jump back and forth between them. Just make sure the distraction was as productive as what I was being distracted from is really what made that work well for me. So that was just a method that worked well for me. So let's talk about a few other methods. Some of them might work well for you. So some other study methods. This scene is one I would very much prefer to be in a classroom with you all to go through. Then we can build this list together. So maybe do that. Pause the video and list out study methods that you know of, and that way, and then we'll talk, and talk about them or think about them. What would that work for you? Would it not work? A brainstorming list. The study methods you know. Since we're not in a classroom and can't do this and discuss it as a group, we can at least do it a little bit, right? But there are a lot of traditional ones, and you're probably familiar with one, or you're probably familiar with lots of them. You're probably familiar with way more than one, right? What's a good one? One you may not have used since you were a little kid. Flashcards. And everybody probably knows exactly what I'm talking about because they work. You may not have used it since you were young, but it does work. The drawback on it is flashcards work best if you have a partner helping you, somebody helping you. So when you were young, your parents would be looking, on the card, one side would have a vocabulary term, and the other side of the index card would have the definition that went with that term. And probably your parents or a sibling would be looking at the side with the definition on it while you looked at the word and told them what that, they checked your ability to remember what was on that back side of the card you couldn't see. It's a method that works, especially for the just straight memorization things. The one that always pops to my mind first for those type of classes is anatomy, because anatomy is just memorizing the names of all the parts in the human body for all the people in the medical fields. So there's nothing but memorization in that course. So flashcards are a good one for that. Then we took that learning styles quiz at the beginning. So, which way did you learn best? Are you a visual learner? Draw pictures and stuff. Another thing I often did in classrooms, class lectures while taking the notes, I would doodle all over the page. And when I go back and study before the test, I kind of felt like those doodles helped. It's like my brain formed connection to those pictures drawn in the margins that weren't in the actual words written. Even though the words were, the words written out in the notes was what I was being tested over. While studying, I felt like those pictures drawn down the margins of the page helped. I never did any formal testing on that, but for visual learners, things like that, draw pictures, write the words down, read them. For auditory learners, from that test, if it said you learn best by hearing, read your textbook out loud. Because even if it's your own voice, you're hearing it, and it's still going to impact you better. Tactile learners, you're going to want to come up with something to do. The last tip I give after this scene is probably a good one for tactile learners. But some traditional methods, reading the book or an audio book, because in a lot of cases that's an accommodation for blind people. So the publishing companies are required by law to make those. So get the textbook as an audio book and just listen to it. And another thing we can do in the modern world is YouTube is really beneficial. Something I found that has helped a lot of people. If you take the name of your textbook, the full name, usually the edition and the author's name and everything, and put that in the search bar on YouTube, there's a good chance you can find a lecture from some college somewhere where a teacher is teaching a course out of that same textbook. There's a whole bunch of those on YouTube. So look for that. And then you can listen to it or see it. See somebody give the lecture, somebody else give that lecture, and that just kind of doubles up You know, you have your regular course lecture, and you see somebody else get the lecture, same material, same textbook, and help them reinforce the material. Just repetitiveness. I just pulled up the stack of Post-it notes, right? That's a traditional one. Stick Post-it notes with things you need to know for your test all over your house, so that no matter what you do, there's a piece of the knowledge for the course somewhere it's right in front of you. But some sort of that repetitiveness. I'm just going to write Post-it notes. Post-its everywhere. Reread the textbook. So, are you reading textbooks the same way you would read, say, the Harry Potter series, right? And that big fiction book, we want to detail, be careful and detailed, read every word, because that's going to be full of Easter eggs and all that. Textbooks, not so much. That's the purpose of a textbook, is to get the information across to you. And good textbooks are organized in a manner that you don't even have to read all the words. They're usually set up. I'll pause the video and grab one. So here's textbook for the other course I'm teaching this 8-week term. It was sitting on top of everything, so I just grabbed it. So unlike, say, the Harry Potter books series or Stephen King's Dark Tower series, something where you're going to want to detail every word, you know, those interesting fiction ones, textbooks are set up to be skimmed through. Is this going to show up on the camera? Kind of. So you can at least see the header, the section header. So it's going to be split up with, there'll be labels on every section. And then inside that section, a well put together textbook should be put where you can read the first sentence and the last sentence of that section and get all the information. So they're set up to like preview, you know, the first sentence or two. The details is the bulk of the paragraphs there, and then a summary, the last sentence or two. So well-written textbooks are set up so that if time's running short, or if you've already read the chapter, you can check the section labels, the first sentence, maybe two, and then the last sentence or two in that section. And then that has the information from that section. In between those is just the same information, more detailed out. So, reread, I guess I'll put that on the list. But it could take a while to fill out a huge list like this, right? So maybe work on putting one together and think about yourself, what you know about yourself, what you know works, what you know doesn't work, and the different methods, and try to figure out what works best for you. That way you're getting the most out of your classes and you're ready for your finals 2 weeks from now. That kind of idea, just list out a common method. Oh, another one I should put here is Google. So good practice as you're coming on your final exams. So actually Google, or there's other search engines, but search for like the course name, whatever course it is, and then put final exam. Search for that and you'll find old final exams from that course all over the internet, or study guide. And then that'll give you, practice test. Give you little bits to practice on so you're more ready for the actual test. And, figure out what works best for you, and then, study so that when you go in and take your own final exam, you're ready to do that. So just some traditional methods. You can find a huge list, or just Google study methods. You're going to find a lot of results from that. You're going to find a huge list from that. And even if you have to make your own, start looking through that list and think about your personality. It's like, oh, that's not going to work. That's not going to work. Oh, that one might work. Cross things off, circle it on the list, figure out what works best for you. And one more thing that worked really well for me that I thought I'd share here as well. And one more thing here that worked really well for me, just make it memorable. It takes a little bit extra, and apply your creativity and do something to make it memorable. So here in the room I'm in, I already brought a textbook in for that last scene. Oh, this will work. I got an idea. Use my electric machine. Oh, well, maybe two more ideas. So the reason I have the blackboard is this is in my gym. So this is where I do my math at. So when I want to focus on the problem, I'll put the problem on the board, and then I'll, like, say, turn the rowing machine towards it, and not exhausting myself, but just steady moving, so that my blood's flowing better than it would be sitting at a desk. So I have the chalkboard in my home gym, and then I'll just sit there and go steady on the rowing machine, or do something not too heavy on the weights, and just stare at the problem while I get the blood flowing a little bit better than it would be sitting at the desk. That's what I like to do when I focus on a problem. But like I said a moment ago, what I usually do is the whole scatter thing, do different things. And one thing that I found worked really well is to make it memorable. Do something very, very memorable. So this will work. Like these two handles here, like looks like an upright from a football field. So then when I get to the definition, open to a random page here in the book. Okay, good. There's some words in bold. So concatenation. Take two strings and joins them to produce a single string result. Concatenate's our verb for string data. That's the technical term in computer stuff for the written language. And concatenate is the verb to put them together. So I'll probably do this on a more complicated example than this, but that was a quick one. So to drive that into memory, read the example, then step back. Oh, the kick's no good. And something memorable, like try to kick a field goal with your textbook. But that's really going to make it memorable. That's the other method I found that worked for me really well, especially on the more complicated things. Something to make it memorable. We read through that section, that really hard paragraph in the material, and maybe quickly skim back over it again, then stand up and walk over to your bathroom and fling the textbook into the bathroom. And then on test day, have that extra memory there that, when you see the question about it, it's like, oh yeah, this is where I tried to flush the textbook down the toilet. And I found that to be super helpful. So just one other tip, some tips I thought I'd share. But again, you have to find what works best for you. And just, that's going to take a little bit of experimenting. So you're going to want to approach it somewhat systematically, pay close attention to, what you do when you study and how well the results are. And then change that up on your next exam. What did you do when you studied, and how good were the results? And figure out what works best for you.